Hey there, my friends. How's everybody doing today? It's Carpo. It's a beautiful Thursday afternoon. Clear skies out there, the sun's shining. Gorgeous. It's a perfect time to talk about what I think to be one of the greatest shows of all time, if not the most socially influential show, which is South Park. And I know that there are many people out there who absolutely hate the show and many people who love it. I realize that people who haven't watched South Park or watched episodes all the way through may not understand many of the jokes that go back several seasons. They may also not understand the subtle underlying message, which could be one simple sentence in the entire episode that proves the point, that makes the point and sends it home, that it's not it's poking fun at these societal issues and people in order to prove a point. They've been basically, let's put it this way, the show may be disgusting. There may be some absurd episodes that even make the creators cringe, or their strongest fans may go, "Why did you put that in there?" And I think that the absurdity is a byproduct or a secondary effect of trying to fit so much information and so many ideas into one show. And I think they've done a phenomenal job at it. Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of the show, they've done a phenomenal job over the years at really improving and intertwining the stories to create a larger point. Now look, over the years they've made fun of every celebrity you can imagine, but it's usually only the celebrities that, it's not often poking even at the celebrity themselves. For example, they did a horrible episode that was pretty crude about Britney Spears, but the whole point wasn't to poke fun at Britney Spears. It was to poke fun at the media and people for being so obsessive about, and that was, of course, over 10 years ago. They've done an episode with Michael Jackson where he, like the Peter Pan guy, they called him Mr. Jefferson, and a lot of people were very offended by that, but at the time it was an issue, and if these issues don't come out and they're not talked about, sometimes people are blinded by their heroes in Hollywood and elsewhere, and their musicians, that have done some pretty ridiculous things. And when they get called out on it, not only do their fans get upset, but the people get upset. Tom Cruise tried to sue them, supposedly, because they did this episode coming out of the closet, where he was literally in a closet and wouldn't come out. But they were poking fun at Scientology the whole time. In fact, up to that point, they had Chef in the show, and the guy who voiced it refused to do the show anymore because they were making fun of his religion at that time. And they poked fun at all religions. But for people, Oprah, Dr. Phil, Russell Crowe, Al Gore, they did the Man-Bear-Pig like a decade and a half ago, where Al Gore was out there to scare everybody with this man-bear-pig that he was trying to convince everyone existed, and it was the metaphor for climate change. Well, they actually went and did another episode, 10 years later, just like last year, I think, or the year before, about how Man-Bear-Pig turned out to be real. Because basically everyone was scaring everyone with climate change back then. Well, when they became aware that, yes, actually the climate is changing, then they're willing to go back and say, hey, maybe we were wrong. Not to get into the climate change debate, but they've done some pretty crude ones with Paris Hilton, with George Lucas, the Kardashians, J-Lo, Bono, Jonas Brothers, Mel Gibson, Lorde, Jeff Foxworthy, and one of my favorite ones was Kanye West. And what actually inspired me to make this video about South Park was when I was reading about some celebrities that were complaining about being in South Park. It was when I was reading about thin-skinned celebrities, and I was wondering, why is it that the people who often have the most fame and the most recognition, who make their money off of that fame and recognition, are the same ones to be super thin-skinned when they're called out or criticized? And the article was talking about how it's changed over time. Actors, musicians, they could isolate themselves in the past from criticism because they didn't have the internet. But now if you have a Twitter account, people are going to post what they think. And so now people are calling out all their fan base to go and harass these people who maybe don't even have any followers or anything. Just some random teenager leaves a comment about somebody who's famous on their Twitter feed, and they go ballistic and call the person out. People have even had death threats by the fans and stuff. So it shows how this society's changing and how fame changes people, but often how people just cannot take criticism. And it seems like the more criticism you should be able to take, in other words, the more you're in the public eye, you should be able to take it. But a lot of these actors have been very cool with the fact that, South Park has used them and they don't care. Even Russell Crowe didn't care. Kanye, on the other hand, he can't take criticism because he can't see how he's viewed. He's completely oblivious to how people see him. In his mind, all that matters is how he sees himself and how he thinks he's perceived. And this is how a lot of people are, and this is why they call out so many of these, shallow, isolated, solitary, actors, actresses, musicians, these artists that treat their fans like shit sometimes. But beyond the people, they've talked about, especially when they go into religion, there's always somebody who gets offended by that, because they've attacked Christians, they've attacked the Christian church, they've attacked Scientology, as I said, Islam, and this is where it really gets bad, because they've never held back. South Park has never held back on what they wanted to show, and the only time they were forced to was once, when they aired the Mohammed episode and they had to block him out. Why does the garbage man have to be out there making noise right now? I thought he came earlier. Anyhow, go ahead, do what you gotta do. Too bad I don't edit right. One of the aspects of the church, and anyway, they were forced to censor the Mohammed episode because of the fact that Comedy Central refused to air it. And what that did was opened up a dialogue about what we really can't say. In America, we can say anything we want about anything, pretty much, except for not when it comes to criticizing another religion. Not through the media. They refuse. And so there are certain things that we won't talk about. And bringing this to light is important. Church abuse, they've done several episodes about church abuse and the scandals in the Catholic Church. And years ago, people weren't paying it as much attention as they are now. Now that the churches are coming out and actually being forced to reckon with the fact that priests have been abusing people in a place where they're supposed to be protected, that's not just like, oh, well, these things happen. These are things that should really make people think twice about whether this is God's home in the church, whether God has anything to do with the church. Because if these things are being allowed to happen, and then the leaders are even covering it up, I just feel like that's not talked about enough. But there were some more controversial issues that, of course, South Park got into over the years. One was about the gender-neutral bathrooms, and a lot of people threw a hissy fit about that one. Then there was, but they also attack, whether it's right or left or liberal or conservative, it's not that they're any particular view. They make fun of everyone. And there's other shows that don't quite make the same impact. I like some episodes of Family Guy and American Dad, and they make kind of funny points about life, but nothing like South Park does. South Park is very specific. You can watch an episode and know when it was aired by what was going on in the episode. But they exposed recently the greed in this. The episode was about Tegrity Farms, where Randy grows cannabis, and he wanted to sell his weed in China. And so he compromises his integrity from Tegrity Farms to go to China to sell his weed. It was the perfect timing because of what was going on with the NBA. How somebody actually said that they support the Hong Kong protesters, and then they had to pull their tweet and apologize. And the NBA apologized for them because, and a lot of people don't realize this, the NBA makes more money in China than they do in America. They have more people watching. I think they have something like 400 million people over there that watch, and we only have 370 million in our country. So a huge amount of their money comes from over there. It doesn't mean a thing. When you compromise your language and what you're willing to say and what you're able to say, because, and Google's been doing this too, Facebook, these companies have finally given in and they're starting to edit and create these edited versions for dictatorial governments that want to not allow their people to see what's really going on in the world. To me, I think this is one of the biggest travesties that's happening right now, is the suppression of speech and the allowance of it to happen by American companies catering to these other companies, and they brought light to that. The most recent one was about trans women in sports, okay? And I thought it was great. I thought it was absolutely well done. They had Macho Man Randy Savage posing as a trans athlete who joined the women's competition and beat everybody at every single thing. if you can't see that this is actually happening, I'm saying that this is important because I'm not a woman athlete, so why should I care, right? Well, I do, because a lot of women work their whole lives to try to like beat these in these competitions, whether it's weightlifting or anything else. And if that's what moves you, that's great. Now along comes a trans woman who was born as a man, and she wins the competition and takes home all the trophies. Nobody can say anything. All the women are afraid to say anything. Everybody in the competitions are afraid to say anything because of what this politically correct, the PC culture has brought to the table. We're afraid to speak up. Now I'm not. I mean, when it came to, say, Caitlyn Jenner, when Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner, I mentioned this the other day, I could not believe it when I found out that she got Woman of the Year. That actually was just appalling to me. From all of the women out there who have fought so hard for equality and rights and who have actually been oppressed, along comes this famous guy who decides that he wants to be trans and he becomes Woman of the Year, and that makes absolutely no sense to me. It just shows that we are really fooling ourselves. It seems like it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with being trans, and that's not the point. I'm only saying this because I can, because I know that I care about people's rights and freedom to do what they choose. But when it interferes with other folks, and when it's not fair and it's not equal, such as somebody, whether you've taken hormones or not, if you were born a man, you have a different physique. I don't think that they should be able to compete in women's sports. If anything, maybe they should have a trans sports, realm, or where people can compete. I don't know, but it's not fair to other people. And they really talked about that in South Park. And one of the greatest things that they have in there is the PC babies right now. And they're this family of these like 4 or 5 kids that wear sunglasses, and there's the PC principal who basically will scream and yell at anybody and call them all kinds of names, but he refuses to allow anybody to oppress any minorities. He's basically overbearingly annoying and pretending that he's PC to kind of hide something within himself. Anyway, I can't really explain that all here, but somebody defined it as verbal gentrification. I thought that was a great definition, because people are choosing not to say what they mean and how they feel because they're afraid of being cast as a hater or transphobic or homophobic or racist. And people are really starting to cater to the way other people want them to speak because of that. And so the culture has been shaped to protect us from seeking the truth or what we really feel or how we feel. For all the time that we've been said to speak your mind and say it how you feel, now we're told that it's the opposite. And people aren't saying how they feel a lot of the time. And so this ends up with something like the hashtag woke, which is, as a guy who I guess is a liberal-minded person, I mean liberal-minded in the sense that I care about everyone's equal rights and freedoms and protections. Other than that, people should be able to do whatever they choose to do with their lives. I feel like the government is the greatest enemy. It has nothing to, not the enemy, but the greatest obstacle to us really being able to live good, comfortable lives because of all the lobbying and corruption. But we're constantly turned against each other in believing that everyone's racist or everyone's homophobic, when most people just don't care. Most people could care less what you do with your life. There's always going to be a few who speak louder. And that goes for the PC culture as well as the extreme right-wing, alt-right that wants to scream about the liberals. There's fighting going on opposite ends, but it's not most people. That has to be said. It's a minority of people. But this whole, basically the hashtag woke, right, as a metaphor, is being used to sell you products. Now everybody wants to sell you something that, it all started with organics and people wanting to say, we protect the earth and this is all natural. And now it's like, we support this and we support that. We support these rights. Really, these companies don't give a shit. They're just using this idea to sell a product. And it's so obvious when you see it, but a lot of folks aren't that aware. A lot of folks are still learning how these things work, advertising works, and how your brain is easily fooled to buy something where the company really could give 2 shits. But one of the travesties of this is that we feign understanding of culture. all of us feign and pretend to understand how the other side feels, or pretend that we understand what it would be like to be in a minority, people use that as almost a way to say, look what I'm doing for others, instead of I'm doing it for myself. It's kind of like the guy who brags about giving to charity all the time, you know. Yeah, I give charity, I give this much to charity. Look, here's my check stub. You know, people do things because it makes them feel good. We have to realize this. So whether you're helping others or helping a charity, we do it because it makes us feel good, because we like seeing people do well. Some folks take it too far and assume that anyone who disagrees with something is somehow, a racist or a hater or judgmental or whatever it might be, and I think that it's gone a little too far. So they have we manufacture tragedies when there are none. So even when we're doing well, we seem to be able to play the victim quite well. And I think that South Park captures this victimhood mentality really well, in a way that's not too intrusive. It's not like it is really making fun of anyone in particular. It's just making fun of everyone in particular. And I've even seen a couple where I had to think twice, like, am I like that? And I think that that's where that show keeps people honest, you know? It's like, am I acting absurd? Because I shouldn't be offended by this unless I'm that way, right? And somehow defending it. So, anyhow, none of the things I said are necessarily mean that I am opposed to any of these things, whether it's gender-neutral bathrooms or trans women competing in sports. But I think that it's important that we really acknowledge these things, the truth about these subjects. But most of all, don't be afraid to talk about them, you know? I know that most people I don't know anything anymore. I don't know how most people are. I should say most of the people I talk to are able to talk about these things without getting too offended. But even with good friends, you might get into a heated debate about what racism is and isn't, or what America means or doesn't, or just what it means to be a human. And I think when we realize our own insignificance, yet our own impact on others' lives, we can kind of let go of this ego to protect whatever we think is, I don't know. Let's just put it this way. We have to protect what we think to be true and fair and real, and protect the rights of other people. But we have to know what our limits are. And I think we're still feeling that out and learning it. And thank goodness South Park has come along the way to help us to see that it's not just us that sees the absurdity in these things. So those are my thoughts on South Park. And some of these issues are just really too hard to talk about because they're so complicated. Somebody always gets offended. And I want to find a productive way to discuss these things where we can all step back and laugh at each other, and ourselves especially. Because if you can't laugh at yourself, that's the first sign that you're missing an important part of the argument. Because I step back and I think, God, you said that. Why did you say that? Or why did you act this way? Or do this or not do this? It's just part of the self-criticism and understanding and awareness. If you really want to know what it means to be woke, it means that you take things for what they are. You know, it's a balancing act, an understanding of yourself and those around you. You can never convince anyone else of it, nor should you want to. You should just be wanting to inspire other people to find their own truths as well. And I feel like so much of what television and the media has brought to us has just been this surface bullshit garbage. These horrible shows, you know, these horrible talk shows, horrible television series, and very rarely does something come out that can endure time, 23 years, like South Park has. And so it must mean something to somebody. Peace and love and all that stuff. Talk to y'all later. Be well.